Hey everyone, it's Geno here. Welcome back to the Can I Ask You a Question podcast. Here on the podcast, we're a community of curious people looking to get better at life week after week. So, on behalf of all of us curious people, I'll be interviewing excellent and interesting people so we can learn from their hard-earned wisdom and experiences and apply it in our own life. I have just one ask for you. It'd be a huge favor, and one offer to add value to your life as well. The ask is this: would you rate and review this podcast wherever you're listening? It'll help us increase the reach and the influence of our community here on the podcast. And the offer is this: I send out a weekly newsletter called The Wise Letter each Thursday. If it would add value to your life, if you're looking to grow healthy, wealthy, and wise, and I don't know who isn't, then go to genoschmelzer.com, subscribe to the newsletter, and I'll be sending it to you for free every Thursday. With that, let's just jump into today's podcast. It's with my good friend, Thomas West. I'm here today with one of my longtime friends, Thomas West. And I think you're usually on podcasts supposed to let them write their own bio, but I wrote his bio for him. So I put Thomas West and his wife are currently founding a new church in Salem, Oregon. It's called Joy Church Salem. He's a father to 3 kids and a loving husband. He spent years developing his fitness and is an avid fan of the UFC. He's also one of my oldest friends, and we've shared many adventures and sometimes misadventures together. So, Thomas, thanks for being on the podcast, and it's good to get to chat with you.
Yeah, buddy. Thanks for having me. Excited.
Yeah, of course. Well, we're going to just jump right in. The first thing I wanted to kind of ask is, can you just give us like a 2-minute version of your life story, the kind of the Cliff Notes of Thomas West?
Yeah, I'm 33 years old. I was born in Salem, Oregon, where we're planting a church. My mom died when I was really young, almost 3 years old, went to foster care, ended up getting taken in by my aunt and uncle because my dad went to prison. And my aunt and uncle eventually adopted me in Southern Oregon, where they first went to a church called Joy Christian Fellowship and found church community and life. And my dad was in and out of prison till he died on my 12th birthday. And I grew up in church with you. We met at almost 3 years old. So it's been a long time. I grew up in church. I was homeschooled, graduated when I was 15. I went to Bible college and an internship program after that, which was a 3-year program. Graduated with my bachelor's in ministry and theology, and jumped around different work ventures. Met my wife in Bible college. We dated young and got married young. I think I was 21 when we got married. We've been married for coming up on 12 years here in 2 weeks. And like you said, we have 3 kids. We have an 8-year-old named Hannah, and we have a 5-year-old named Adeline and a 10-month-old boy named Owen. We've been in full-time ministry for the past 4 years. So about 5 years ago, we moved from Medford to Eugene to help Pastor Jake Schmelzer at Joy Church Eugene with their church. And kind of out of nowhere, about a year later, we got an opportunity to go to a town called Newburgh, which is where we live now, which is kind of a outside Portland, about 40 minutes from Portland. And we were on staff at a church there as kind of associate pastors for the last 4 years. And always had in our hearts to plant a church. And so now we're in the process of getting ready to move to Salem to do that.
Hey, that was a pretty good summary. Thanks for giving the Cliff Notes version. A lot there. And the first thing that I wanted to kind of to dive into and talk about in our conversation was long-term friendships. Something I like to say is, it takes 20 years to build a 20-year friendship.
Totally.
30 years to build a 30-year friendship. That is one of those things money can't buy, efficiency can't do. You could obviously build that closeness perhaps sooner, but there's nothing quite there. The years just take years. And so even as we're talking, I think there's kind of a unique perspective for the audience listening, because we got to see each other grow up. And I think that's interesting, but not just ourselves, but just in general. What are your thoughts on long-term friendships? What has changed about your perspective about a friendship over the years? And do you value them differently, for example?
Yeah, I think I would preface it with saying that my opinion on this topic is still in development. And so I reserve the right to be wrong or change my mind.
Yeah.
Also, I think I differentiate like friendship and deep friendship. So typically a long-term friendship would probably also be a deep friendship because that's what made it long-term. I would consider us deep friends, but I know that everybody's definition of deep friendship would be different too. For me, it means that we are bound, and what we have in common are values, not necessarily interests. And we do have common interests. So I'm not saying specifically you and I, but our values of what brought us together and kept us together, brought us through good times and, even as you said, misadventures. So my opinion of long-term friendships is they're awesome. Long-term deep friendships, awesome. When it comes to my perspective on friendships in general, looking back on my life, I think I wish I had more of a value for friendships. I feel very fulfilled with the amount of deep friendships I have. And again, I know we all have different definitions. For me, a deep friendship is and happy belated birthday. If you had a party and you invited me, I live 4 hours away, I would do my best to make it there. If you called tomorrow in crisis, it doesn't necessarily, I would do my best to help, but it doesn't necessarily mean constant contact either, right?
Yeah.
For me, deep friendship means like, hey, you're my guy. Even if we don't talk for months and months and months, something happens, something goes down, I'm there for you. I don't necessarily wish I had a lot more of those. I feel very fulfilled in the amount of those. In fact, sometimes even those can be taxing, especially when you're far away, like I am, from all of them almost. Because, we visit home. I've got all my family, but I've got all these deep friendships that I want to invest in. I do wish I had more of a value for just friendships growing up. We could probably rattle off a long list of names of people that we know and know us, or rather we know of and they know of us, but they wouldn't refer to us as friends. They would be or at least me, acquaintances. And that's probably primarily because of the way I treated them. Like I wish growing up, I wish in my younger years, I had more of a value for just friendship. Hey, let's be friends. Let's not put the relationship on the table because of your interests, my interests, or even some of these probably lesser important values. They don't have to push us away from just being friends. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of a couple of thoughts come to mind when you're saying that. And I liked what you said about, hey, we may not have a bunch of common interests, or we may on those deep friendships, but it's that shared values.
Yeah.
That was one thing I think we both agree on that, and is so true. The other thing I think you'd said about, and I have that same regret, is you look back at people and you go, they're a really either a cool person now or a really good person. And I just and I was around them for years, and we didn't connect. I never really enjoyed their presence and their friendship. And I think that is something that isn't just a problem when we're in our teenage years or even our college years. I think that probably goes on for a long while. Maybe not. We're probably smarter now. Do you think some of that has to do with like personal, every personality is different, but personal like ladder climbing tendencies, ambition, like who are the cool people and who's going to help me be on the cool team? Do you think some of it's like insecurity? Why do we pass up certain people?
Yeah, I think there could be a ton of reasons. I think you probably nailed it on the head, at least in my experience with the ladder climbing. Even though the ladders I thought I was climbing in some years past, there was nothing at the top of that ladder. And so that's what makes it worse, right? Like when I get introspective, and it could be that I'm insecure now, and that's not even true, but I think of people that I knew, and it wasn't that I just missed an opportunity to hang out with them. It's that for whatever reason, whether that be an interest difference or a value difference, I made them feel lesser. And it's not even that I think that today they're very interesting or doing good. It's that I know and I have a conviction that they are a valuable person. And at some point in my life, I probably didn't make them feel valuable or even worth my own investment as a friend. And so I have some deep regret there. for the past. And again, I haven't really been confronted with that by anybody. That's my own like introspective feelings. Today, if I'm passing up friendships, part of it could be just the natural busyness of life and the first priority of my family. But part of it also could be some of that continued ladder climbing. And I hope that there are actually things at the end of these ladders, right? That there are peaks and platforms to achieve. But I don't necessarily think those things are worth passing up other relationships either.
No.
Yeah.
And I think more and more, and I think we're both almost identical age. Thomas is 10 months older, share
So
the
much
same
older.
birthdays, but 2 months apart, but the same date.
As demonstrated in the gray.
The levels of our white beards. But I think like the idea that like building a relationship with someone just for what they could do. I mean, they say that. A lot of things say build your network, put yourself out there, and there's something to that. But I think if you really genuinely don't respect them or enjoy them, well, I guess what I'm learning in life is there's more than one way to achieve a goal.
Mm-hmm.
And so why achieve it in a way that is A, at its worst really slimy, but B, just less enjoyable. And I think that it's motivating me to go, okay, how about I like do business with people that I enjoy? Maybe we won't get there as fast, but we're going to get there and actually enjoy them versus this guy or this gal that maybe I just don't have a natural, I don't know. There's not that there's an ulterior motive. I think I'm realizing that it's probably not even necessary. So why do it?
Sure. Yeah. I like that.
We'll keep jumping on something, and feel free to say, hey man, too personal, which you won't probably do, but you can. You were really honest in that answer there of, hey, I probably was, maybe if I got your words right, unkind or gave off a feeling of that kept people at bay.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to get into the conversation deeper in. You as a close friend of you, I would describe you as a fighter, as a warrior, as someone that you want around you in a literal fight, in a relational fight. You're someone like when it goes down that, and I think you have high protective instincts. I think that'd be accurate.
Yeah.
Also, I think you're an 8 on. Are you an 8 on the Enneagram?
At one time I thought I was. I'm a 1.
Perfectionist.
Yeah.
But definitely for people at the Enneagram, probably that'd be like a first impression, even though I guess that's not the final, would be like, man, this guy's strong. For other people out there, and we're going to talk about it, we're going to talk about the virtue in that. And so there's so much virtue in that warrior type, in that defensive type, in a strong man or a strong woman. But any more advice, just if I nailed that right, so yeah, that more or less, that kind of sounds like my personality. What advice would you give to other people to do relationship better? If they're like, yeah, like, that I think my strength is getting in front of me. I think my wit is getting in front of me, or whatever that might be, my aggression. Any wisdom on that? Maybe you've learned as you've kind of tempered that. And because what I have seen as a friend is over the last years is this like, whoa, this guy that is just as capable of ripping my head off is actually leaning in with a tenderness. And I love those kind of guys where they're like, dude, that's a man's man. Or a really, really strong, sharp woman that then leans in. You can tell they're consciously saying, hey, I'm not here to bully. I'm not here to intimidate. I want to build you up. I'm actually a safe person. My strength actually makes people feel safer. I want to honor you because that's what I've observed is like, well, there's this cool development. If you're seeing that in yourself, what's going on, and what advice would you have for other guys or gals that are maybe kind of like that kind of have that warrior-esque mentality?
Yeah. There's an old cliche, meekness isn't weakness, right? It's strength under control. And I think true strength, true capacity for violence requires meekness. It requires self-control. It requires, and I think that's what, I'm not even saying I'm that guy. You're saying I am, but men I look up to, they're capable of great violence, but they have it totally under control. And the Chronicles of Narnia, I might butcher the quote, but at one point, one of the characters asks, if Aslan is safe, and
Mm-hmm.
Aslan is a representation of God, and they respond that Aslan's not safe, but he is good, right? He is very powerful, so he's not necessarily safe, but he is a good lion. He's a good character, and so he's got it under control. And so the first thing I think with all men, whether you have aggressive tendencies or not, is to learn self-control, to learn to control yourself, learn to value other people, and realize that person across from you doesn't need to have a demonstration of your strength most of the time. They need to have a demonstration of your strength under control, that you can treat them with value, that you can love them. I'm probably circling the question a little bit.
Really good.
I think another thing, I think we'll probably talk about marriage a little bit more, but like one thing that really changed the trajectory of my marriage, I think, and the way that I talked to my wife, was being less concerned about being right about everything and being more concerned with us being more together at the end of an argument or at the end of an issue. That it's not about, hey, I beat you in this argument and then I win and I'm smarter. It's that, hey, now we both understand not only each other, but the issue. We're on the same page because we're a teammate. It's never me versus her. It's always us, right? And I think if we treated other people that way better, we'd maintain relationships. We build people up. Even if you have that strong personality, instead of coming at them and treating them like opposition and treating them like you're against them, trying to get them to come like in a healthy way to an understanding of what you're trying to say or do.
That's really good. I think we're going to talk about fitness later on in the conversation. I think that phrase you said, strength under control, did you coin that, or have you heard that somewhere?
No, I've heard it before. Yeah. And it's big in the combat sports world too, right? That good men aren't, like incapable of violence. They're capable of violence, but they control it. They know when to save it for. They're not erratic. They're not, they don't have anger problems. They're not just peacocking all the time. That they're capable, but they control it.
Yeah, it's so good. And to me, I think that transfers across so many like life disciplines, which is a theme of this podcast, is, hey, we want to succeed in our health and our wealth and our wisdom holistically. And to me, I'm thinking, okay, like literally I'm working on strengthening my core and like, strength and stability through the movements and static movements. But then in a conversation, so many times I've let go of my I guess better judgment, and I lash out. I get frustrated instead of having that, and because maybe my strength, my mind's like, you're wrong. I can already see where this argument's going, but instead of holding that in control and really waiting for the appropriate moment to share something or to never share it, I've often been strength out of control or erratic control. It's like when your arms are shaky and you're working out. I think that's I like that phrase a lot, strength under control.
I think it's an old Chinese proverb, and I think I'm butchering it a little bit, but the idea is there.
That's the gist. Mm-hmm. Do you know who Ben Shapiro is, the political commentator?
Yeah, I don't know his content very well, but I have seen some of it and interacted with a little bit.
Little anecdote. I just watched a podcast with Ben being interviewed. And the one thing I think most people would agree is he's just like a brilliant guy. He's he reminds me a little bit of Spock from Star Trek. Nice. He's just like talks super fast, doesn't come across as super emotional. And he's just like, he can out debate in my mind, just about anybody. Wow. But he was talking about where his wife and he just loves his wife, and his wife's a doctor. His wife's, I guess, brilliant. She's not super into politics, and that's his whole, field and world. Yeah. And I guess he learned that when they argue, he can't Ben Shapiro her. Mm. It's just not, and that she'll actually stop him and just be like, hold on, wait, like you're going into your debate voice. Yeah. And he just like realized, and I'd first thought for her, like, how bad would that be? Like, no one can out debate Ben Shapiro. Like, you're arguing about we're going to go for Chinese food, and he's going to have just the most brilliant answer in like 10 seconds. Right. That was another good, that whole podcast, it was really, that was kind of the theme, is like, here's this really smart, sometimes maybe caustic guy who actually in his everyday life has realized there's a place for that. And then there's a place where that's not going to work. And he realized that. And he's, I guess he drops that part of his personality. And literally he said, like in that conversation, he's had to help her. He's asked her, like, honey, tell me when you want me to help you solve a problem and when you just want me to listen.
Yeah.
And she had to clarify. And I think, in our own ways, and for everybody watching, I think we all have to learn that as we grow up, right? Is okay, there's these parts of my personality that are good, but not here and now like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was
Absolutely.
interesting.
That's super interesting. Yeah. I think kind of tying into some of the things we've talked about, one thing I've learned too is just like not to put in younger years, for me, it was so easy to just put relationship on the table. Like, hey, if we can't come to an agreement, then this is on the table. And I want to almost never do that now, unless it's like something.
I did the same thing.
Yeah, unless it's something insanely huge. Now it's like, no, I want to fight to be in relationship with you, even if we disagree on this, and we'll continue to work through it. You know, I don't want to. I'm not necessarily agreeing to disagree on everything, but you know where I'm going there. Like, not just say, hey, then relationship's gone. You know.
Yeah. For me, marriage helped make that so clear, because the person that I would disagree most frequently with, at least in our early years, is my wife, but she's also the person I most love, the person I most need, and the person that's done the most for me.
Yeah.
But now transferring out to other people and just being like, am I going to forget everything that we had and they did for me and I did for them because they're legitimately maybe wrong right here. I'm legitimately wrong. We won't know for years sometimes who was right or ever, but you assume that they're wrong and you're right. But that's such a good point as well. I'm trying to do the same thing myself. Well, we got so much to talk about. We might double back on some of this. If we get the chance, I want to talk about, you said a bad word. You didn't really, but the word violence. And violent, the word violent or violence, like I honestly felt like someone's going to censor us just for saying that word. Like, no, like this is supposed to be PG. There's no violence in this video game or whatever. The bad guys always just fall off the cliff unseen. I think what we both agree, and we might get into it later, is there actually is a virtuous version of violence. There is a place, and it's necessary. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think we'll probably get back in that, but I'll earmark that. But that was interesting just in itself, because clearly our whole conversation is about forgiveness, gentleness, relationship. But that doesn't hand in the card to get violent when you have to. Either in rare situations, I think we're talking literal, or a lot more violent in your attitude against a behavior or a way of thinking or a threat to your marriage or. There's definitely places for it. So hopefully we'll get back to that. But I wanted to jump into a little bit, a few other questions.
Yeah.
We've been friends about 30 years. So looking backwards, just kind of on that theme, what advice would you give yourself, maybe just quick advice during college, then again at the beginning of your marriage, and then again once you became a dad? And if there's any other, what you want to add in there, but kind of some of those three spots as a man, and for those gals that are listening here, you can kind of translate that yourself. But what advice would you give?
Yeah, I'll give you what comes off the hip. I'm sure there's other things I could add to this, but if I could go back to myself in college, I would give myself some of that same friendship advice about, hey, be friendly, right? I'm not saying that like you have to be best friends with everyone, but be friendly. Number two, very practically, I would make a lot of physical changes and value sleep and nutrition a lot more. When I think back to those times in Bible college, I was exhausted all the time and I always felt crummy. And most of that's just because of practical things I was ignoring. Even though I wasn't totally ignorant to them, I was just kind of rebellious to them, what I ate, how much I slept. And I think that would really help me. And we'll probably talk about this some more. Those physical things would have helped me emotionally, and it would have even helped me intellectually, right? It would help me to learn better because I would be more attentive. Now, some of that is just that I needed to actually try harder and lean into some classes a little bit better. But the physical, I think I think health is holistic, and I think that your spirit affects your body, and that your body affects your emotions, and vice versa. But one very, very neglected thing for me in those college years was just physical health of any kind. So that would be one very practical thing that I would do, other than the relational stuff. And then also just being present. Like, hey, this education is important. This season isn't going to last forever. I need to be present. In marriage, we covered this a little bit. I would go into marriage not wanting to be right about everything. There was a title of a book, and I'm not endorsing the book because I actually didn't read it, but it provoked me. That stuck with me for like 15 years. There's a title of a book called Talk to Me Like I'm Someone You Love. And I read that in passing, this is the title, and I thought about it, and it's like not every time, but most times in an argument, like I'm reminding myself, talk to her like you love her.
It's good.
Talk to her like you love her, not like she's your opponent. I'm not trying to be right and win, because when I win and she loses, then I lose in marriage.
Yes.
I want to win, and that means that we're on the same page. That means I'm talking the right way. That would be for marriage. And then as a father, so many things. I think to just go back to when I was a dad, I couldn't necessarily solve the things I'd want to as a dad, which is some more emotional health awareness. And that would have probably started in that college conversation, because I think marriage tests your emotional health. I think fatherhood for me has tested my emotional health a lot more. My kids are awesome, but it tests your patience. And the one thing I talked to you about before is just this idea before kids that your life has to change. And I was so determined that my life's not going to change. I'm going to drag my kids to do all the same things I already do. And what I found is that in infancy, that was pretty doable. My kids, they nurse to eat and they sleep in a car seat, no big deal. But as soon as they're eating solid foods and walking around, those late nights where I'm not giving them good rest, those add up, and then their bodies break down and they get sick. And then it just starts this domino chain reaction, all because I refused to accept that my lifestyle had to change. And not that I had a crazy lifestyle at all. I just, when someone tells you it's going to be hard because you have to change, my personality is like, well, I'm going to make sure this isn't hard. I'm going to just make sure everything's normal. But I would go back and try to convince myself, hey, this isn't about proving other people wrong. It's about being a good dad and what's best for your kids, that your kids need sleep. They need routine. And the best way to love your kids oftentimes is to sacrifice.
Yeah, that's good. And I think maybe the parent, maybe yourself or myself, maybe we could grit through. But to ask a child to do that the same like we both have served often together in church and ministry and have worked together, to have them out of the same late night events, that to me, you just look at them and you realize that's not wise.
Yeah. And my eldest daughter went through some of that, and there's primarily pros that come out of it. Like, she has been exposed to a lot of really good stuff, but then there was also those seasons where it's like, okay, well, there's also some physical, real, practical consequences of emotional mood swings because of sleep deprivation and so forth. So
and it is a balance for sure. And I think on that stuff, what I'm realizing is, as a parent, you guys have 3 kids. Allie and I have our one daughter at this time. It does, like, the demands on us are different, and because like they're going to wake up at that time in the morning no matter what. So you can't, like, okay, I'll stay up late, do this work, and then I'll sleep in. You can stay up late, but you're still waking up early.
Yep.
And they still need you to be happy and smiling and reading the same kid's book, 10 times. And I think so even as I said that maybe the adult could grit through, the kid shouldn't have to, on an extreme level. Even as a parent, I'm realizing I really am probably I probably am going to fail and be a lot more snappy or less attentive or more on my phone or watching a show and not as connected with my daughter if I'm not getting in a rhythm that I can sustain.
Absolutely. Yep.
That's totally good. And I think it's good for everyone listening to realize that and not feel bad about it. And of course, it's going to be a little bit different for everybody. Well, thanks so much. Okay, next
Yeah.
kind of area of topic. You didn't write these. This is my opinion. But I had this. You are one of the physically grittiest and toughest guys I know. You're also one of the first guys I knew who really got into JiuJitsu, JiuJitsu, and watching the UFC over a decade ago now, I believe. And I know very little about jiu-jitsu and even less about the UFC. But how did these interests begin for you? If I got that right, because it's grappling and jiu-jitsu, right? Brazilian
Yeah.
jiu-jitsu. Brazilian, that is different, right?
It
Brazilian
is,
jiu-jitsu.
yeah. And even what I do is morphed. It's Brazil, based in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but it's a little different too.
So how did that all begin? All that love of watching the UFC and grappling and
Yeah. I'll go back to our bad word, violence. You would remember as a kid, I've always actually been attracted to violence. Somewhat normally, right? Like I loved Ninja Turtles, Power Rangers, X-Men, Spider-Man. But my dad too,
you carrying them around.
yeah, my dad. I mean, I grew up. Uh, don't judge him; he probably wouldn't do it the same. But I grew up watching '90s action films as a young man, and always had an affinity for violence. But I never had the frame for it. I was a skinny twig of a child, and I was not blessed with athletic genes. I'm not naturally athletic, almost at all. Like I was never the fastest. I don't have naturally good cardio. I might have been kind of strong at some point, but I was just twig, but I still liked aggression. I was also homeschooled. So like I didn't have the exposure to mainstream sports that you would get at a public school. It took a lot more effort, and I did play a little bit of basketball, and I wasn't very good. I don't have like naturally good hand-eye coordination. Anyway, I remember May 2007. So it would have been right before I turned 17. So 16 years ago. I went. We were getting ready for our church that we grew up at had a tailgate party. There's a whole story behind that, but we would do service outside, and I helped with the sound department. So the audio technicians, we'd set up the day before, and we'd spend the night at the church. Well, we'd always do something fun in the evening, whether it was capture the flag at the building, or one of the times we went to a guy named Ben's house, and the young adults were having a barbecue. And when I got there, they were watching the UFC, and it was Chuck Liddell versus Rampage Jackson. I'd never heard of it. I'd never seen it, but I'd always liked combat and didn't know much about it. I had tried a Taekwondo class when I was a kid and didn't have a good experience. I think I left crying, but they made me do the splits, and they forced me to do the splits, and it was not a good experience. I also thought it was silly. Anyway, I won't go on all of that. But when I saw it, it was not to overstate it, but I felt connected to it. It felt like it was something that I was missing my whole life. Like I had always thought it's silly that there's all these disciplines of combat, but they don't practice them all together. And I'd seen things in the movies where they, like The Matrix as a kid was one of the most influential movies on my interests, where they would do all the disciplines, but nobody practiced that in real life. Well, at least I thought so, because the UFC, MMA is still in infancy. It was only birthed in the early 1990s, but I saw it in 2007. So I saw that fight and I was hooked immediately when I saw the UFC. Now the UFC is just a company like the NFL, right? It's a league. The sport is MMA. So UFC stands for Ultimate Fighting Championship, but the sport that they promote, so it's a promotion, is mixed martial arts. And back in 1992, 93 is when it began, with the simple idea that most young men think about on the school playground or wherever, which is who's the toughest guy in the room. Well, the promoter who started the UFC said, who's the toughest guy in the world? Like, what if we put a wrestler versus a boxer and a Taekwondo black belt versus a Kung Fu guy? And they brought all these disciplines together in one night, a tournament format with no weight classes and no rules, which means I think the only rules is that you couldn't gouge eyes, but groin strikes were legal. I think biting was illegal, but those were probably the only two things that were illegal.
I feel we're wise to make it legal.
Yeah. There would be a 400-pound guy against a 150-pound guy. and from all disciplines. And you would have to fight to the finish. So meaning make that guy quit or separate him from consciousness, 3 men in one night. So it's like the ultimate test of actual combat. And to everyone's surprise, the guy who won the whole thing was a scrawny 170-pound guy named Hoist Gracie. He was wearing a traditional martial arts kimono, or a gi as we know it now. And he did it using Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Now, jiu-jitsu is old. It's a Japanese martial art that emphasizes more throws than it does ground submissions. And the Brazilians, the Gracie family specifically, they took that and they changed it and they birthed Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And that's where it really broke out onto the scene. And it dominated the UFC for years when it was art versus art. Now, eventually, MMA was born because they began to mix the martial arts. And wrestlers who are usually the dominant grappler because they know how to dictate where a fight can go, when they learned to stop submissions, they started to dominate martial arts. And then when a boxer learned to stop the wrestler from taking them down, and it does that every couple of years now, as MMA evolves and changes, to compete in MMA, you have to be a master of everything. You can't be a specialist. But in the days when it was specialist versus specialist, jiu-jitsu dominated. And I found it in 2007 as a fan and fell in love with it as a fan. And you know me, I've never been super interested in any mainstream sports. I don't watch football. I think I've watched one Super Bowl, and it's because I was in the ER, and that was what was on. And I know I'm an outlier in that sense, but I've never had the attention span for it. But I committed myself as an interest to that, which was a big deal for me because I like to participate in just about any sport. They're fun, but for viewing pleasure, it's just not that fun to me to watch a football or basketball game, except in person. I feel like it's totally different. Like I've been to a Ducks game, and it's way more fun than watching on TV.
Yeah, that's because of the concessions for me. in the crowd.
I even went to a hockey game. I know almost nothing about hockey. I loved it. It was great. But flash forward a couple of years, and before that, growing up, we would wrestle with older young adult guys who had wrestling backgrounds. They'd throw us around, and one guy in particular, his name was Mark Winter, and he was a very accomplished wrestler and wrestling coach. He told me a lot as a young kid, hey, you should have got into wrestling, and I never did because I wasn't affiliated with public school, didn't pursue it. But he said I was naturally decent. And so one day we're at a graduation party for a college, and we're in the backyard. It actually was my in-laws' house, so my wife's house at the time, even though she's not my wife at that time. She is now.
The one wife is still your wife.
Yes. But she wasn't at that time. She was just a friend. We were at a graduation party in her backyard, and a common friend of ours, his name's Skylar. He would be the opposite of who I am as far as background. He had the genes. He was athletic. He played every sport. And he was good at all of them. He came up and said, "Hey, Mark told me that you like to wrestle. That you're good at wrestling." I was like, "Kinda, sure." He's like, "Let's wrestle." It was like right there, and I was like, "No, thanks." And he ended up like pulling my head down and putting me in a guillotine submission, which is a strangulation from the standing position, kind of against my will. And I wasn't trying to engage, but I was like, wow, that was cool. Like, what did you do? He's like, you should come over. So I come over to his house a couple of days later, and
that's the best way to build a friendship is to strangle somebody,
yeah,
against their will.
And
not
we're good friends now, but we were just acquaintances then, separated by years of age and social, not social clubs, but like who we hung out with. Anyway, I came over to his house, and he kind of took me under his wing and mentored me in working out, but also his strategy for learning to grapple was he would watch the UFC, and then we would move the couch and we would try it. And we tried just about everything, and not just grappling. We box and kickbox, and we did that periodically, probably like 3-4 times a year for a few years, and we loved it. But for me, that passion really grew. Like I said, I'm not naturally athletic. I've never taken to any sport by nature. I did with grappling. For whatever reason, even as the guy mentioned before, I was fairly natural with wrestling, even though I didn't know what I was doing. And so that natural ability to do something also sparks more interest sometimes. And so for me, as I became more of a fan of watching MMA and even grappling, in garages and on carpets with Skylar, I took an interest to pursue it more. And so I competed once with no official training. I went and competed and I got annihilated, which for me, I thought was crazy because the guys in our circle who were big and strong and I was able to beat them. But against guys my size who trained, I got absolutely destroyed. And so I thought, I gotta train for real. I gotta find a real gym. Did a little research. My brother-in-law trains at a gym in Grants Pass called 10th Planet JiuJitsu, and they're world renowned. And even 10th Planet JiuJitsu and Andrew Alexander out of Grants Pass is actually world class as well. But I went and started training there, learned that my garage grappling gave me a couple good habits, which is that I can compete, but a lot of bad habits, which is that I didn't know exactly what I was doing, and I've even did some of the wrong things. But I fell in love with it, man. I fell in love with it. I gave myself to it. Found it later in life, so I wish I had found it sooner so I could give it to myself more fully. But I've competed between 10 and 15 times and trained for a number of years. As I've moved from Medford to Springfield, I trained in Springfield, and or Eugene, and then when I moved to Newburgh, I trained in Portland. I have mats in my garage, teach my kids. We plan on training when we move to Salem. I haven't competed in a number of years, but I love jiu-jitsu. I believe in it. It's a passion of mine. I think that
really
about
cool.
sums up that journey.
It's cool. It's cool to see like you said, your passion for it, your interest, the history of it.
Yeah.
I have kind of a love-hate squeamish relationship with like the UFC, and like grappling. Because on one hand, I don't know if it's the voices of others in my head or if it's my own, like, oh, like just, these guys beating each other up. This feels uncomfortable. And on the other hand, whenever I've gone and grappled with you guys or when I hear you guys talk about it, one thing that becomes very apparent is it is incredibly intellectual.
Mm-hmm.
In a different way, not like that everyone just sits there and drinking tea for 2 hours discussing the philosophy, but it's like chess. It's like chess with two guys that are full strength, their mind, the strategies, angles, feints, right? There's so much to it, and it definitely, so that there's the squeamish side, and then there's the respect side of like, hey, this is an art form. This definitely takes self-discipline. This definitely is like the difference between just a violence out of or strength under not in control and strength in control. And overall, when you see, there also seems to be a pretty good after the showmanship, a pretty good. I haven't watched a lot of fights, but it seems like that, like camaraderie afterwards, that respect for your opponent, which is a beautiful. And it's just interesting. It's cool, obviously, how it's shaped your life. How important was that for you, or did you see it as a positive or a negative when you stepped out of a pool of guys that you were at the top of, or right in that top of, and got in a pool where you may or may not win the bout? What was that like for you?
Yeah, it's challenging, and that's why I think I like it. When you're a goal setter, especially, it's like, man, I want to hang with these guys, and I don't want to just hang with them. I want to be able to beat them, to dominate them, and so it's good to not be the biggest fish in a small pond. It's good to find new ponds, be a small fish, and grow. And I also, again, there was some natural ability, and so it wasn't like I was just the worst guy in the room right away. And I learned pretty quick, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn. I'm actually a pretty slow learner, almost everything else. And again, not athletic, but for whatever reason, in jiu-jitsu, I learned pretty quick, and it did come naturally. And you're right, it isn't just, guys aggressively hitting each other. Any combat sport is more like chess than it is checkers at a professional level. And it does engage the brain, and there are endless possibilities and scenarios, especially in martial arts like jiu-jitsu or sports like MMA. And I didn't really ever describe jiu-jitsu. I talked about MMA. Jiu-jitsu is a grappling art form where you use your momentum and your leverage to control somebody on the ground. And eventually, if you have to, whether that be a live self-defense situation or in sport jiu-jitsu, you either strangle them or you hyperextend a limb, whether that's an arm or a leg. But yeah. And I also said earlier that so Brazilian jiu-jitsu is what like launched, the UFC. No-gi jiu-jitsu is something that has evolved into its own art form. So I do exclusively no-gi. The gi is what I refer to either. It's like the traditional martial arts uniform. That's a whole nother, and there's great debates. It's like Pepsi versus Coke, in jiu-jitsu. And I don't have any problem with gi jiu-jitsu. It's just not my thing. There is a place for it. It's more of a traditional martial art, and it'll teach you how to strangle and hyperextend using gis and clothes. I think it's a great thing to do for first responders because you learn how to control people with those clothes. No-gi jiu-jitsu is its own sport, and it's more of a combat sport than it is a martial art. So it's all rooted in the same martial arts that Japanese jiu-jitsu and Brazilian jiu-jitsu, but it's evolved into its own sport as well, and a professional sport where people make professional athlete money.
And that is something that when I talk to you, we're both friends with Skylar and talk with yourself. That is one thing that attracts me about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu does it incorporate strikes or no? Like when we're grappling, we're not striking, we're not punching or kicking. Does Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu incorporate those, or I was in the impression it doesn't, or it's not like the major?
Broad strokes, it doesn't. But every practitioner, every gym can teach it how they want to. If you'd gone in the 1990s and you learned under a Gracie, it was designed for combat and self-defense. So they're going to teach you first because they also didn't have wrestling backgrounds. So the idea of getting a takedown on somebody who's trained, you can't, especially if you can't shoot a really good wrestling style double leg, you're going to bait somebody with a kick or a hit. Now, they're not going to throw them strong and hard, and they're not really trying to hurt you bad, but they would set up a lot of their takedowns with kicks. So it depends on the era. It depends on the gym that you go to. Broad strokes, by and large, if you go into a jiu-jitsu gym, you're not going to hit anyone or receive hits. In no-gi jiu-jitsu, there's a form of jiu-jitsu called combat jiu-jitsu. So the affiliation I'm part of, 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu, it was founded by a guy named Eddie Bravo. And he's famous because he was the first one to ever beat a Gracie in jiu-jitsu competition. And now there's hundreds of gyms all over the world. And he founded 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu specifically for defeating people off their back, even with striking. He developed something called the rubber guard. And there's a lot of debate if that actually works in life situations. But he also promotes combat jiu-jitsu. And so in combat jiu-jitsu, you can hit people, but only on the ground. So we can't hit each other standing, but if you're on the ground, I can hit you. So as soon as someone else is grounded, we can hit, and it's open palm, which doesn't really make a huge difference in power. It just does in wear on your hand. But
so it's not for their head, it's for your hand.
Yeah, I mean, it is for the head to a degree. Like, you're going to see less KOs, but you're still getting hit. So I've done combat jiu-jitsu in training to help other guys get ready, and it's a lot of fun. But to answer your question, by and large, broad strokes, if you go to a jiu-jitsu gym, you're never going to have to throw a punch. And, I mean, even if you did and that's what they do, you would just talk to them and say, I don't want to do that. I want to get hit. And you'd be fine.
And I guess more why I was even thinking about that is, sure, I want to keep this beautiful nose. But what I liked about it is its and I might be miscategorizing it, but it can be viewed as a primarily defensive combat. Sure. Like, you're not, like, I guess you could aggressively go and grab someone and like, what am I trying to say on that? You might initiate, but from a guy that's basically like, hey, I really don't want to hurt anybody, but if I have to stop them, then and actually, if possible, caught, like, my goal in self-defense would be, which I thankfully haven't had to do, would be they need to stop and they need to stay stopped. But I want to do that with as little damage to them as possible. We'll let the authorities bring judgment. They just need to stop. They need to stop whatever they're doing, coming into my house, hurting my family. And that's what I liked about the submissions in jiu-jitsu, is that if you can get them, then in that that chokehold or that arm bar or whatever, like
Yeah.
there is the moment they stop resisting, the pain can stop. Is that more or less accurate?
You're absolutely correct. Jiu-jitsu, by definition, in the I might be getting it a little off, means gentle art. It's designed so that a smaller person can subdue a larger person, and it can do it by controlling them or submitting them. Now, the public opinion of a strangulation, that sounds terrible, right? You probably think of a movie where somebody's like grabbing you by the esophagus and they choke the life out of you. But you can strangle somebody, you shut the blood off to the brain, and there's no harm to them at all. In fact, strangulation sounds more intense than hyperextension, but a hyperextension leaves you injured, right? So breaking an arm or a limb, like that sends you to the hospital. I can choke you unconscious, you wake up in handcuffs and not be hurt.
Yeah.
So like I'm an advocate. I don't push jiu-jitsu on people except for first responders. If I meet a police officer, I'm like, hey, do you train jiu-jitsu? Please do. Please go train jiu-jitsu, because you will learn how to control another human being, no matter if they're bigger or stronger. If they're untrained, you will be able to control them and subdue them safely, even if you have to separate them from consciousness. You don't have to do it by injuring them, because otherwise what you'll do is you'll resort to lethal use of your firearm, or hitting them over the head with your baton, which also could kill them or give them brain damage, because the adrenaline kicks in and you have to defend yourself. So you're going to go to those things instead of being confident that, hey, I can control this person and I can do it with what the public might be perceiving to be dangerous. But it's really actually one of the safest things that you can do, is to choke somebody out and control them.
Yeah.
And you don't even have to always get there, right? You can look up right now on YouTube, guys, subduing people with jiu-jitsu, and they don't even strangle them. They just get into control positions and let them get worn out until an officer arrives, and then helps the officer arrest
freaked
them.
out.
Yeah.
So we don't get sued. We're not telling you to. I'm not telling you anyways. We're not telling you to strangle someone.
Yeah.
You have to make those calls, obey the law, learn from a proper gym. But we're two guys talking, and I want to know this stuff. I want to know. Okay, I was recently in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and actually I was with our friend that we're talking about, and we were our guides take us to the spot, and at some point it came out. We don't. This is a beautiful area. We don't come down here. It's too dangerous. Too many people get robbed. And so like we're here with you, but we don't come down here. And they were gals, so that's probably why. But I remember you're looking around, and as far as I know, I think it's a very high theft rate city, one of the biggest cities in the world, Sao Paulo, Brazil. And I remember asking him, like, hey, if someone, I think they said if I remember right, a lot of times it's with knives, so that there'd be knives involved. What would I do? And just hit him, even being able to talk to me and say, hey, here, if he does this, here would be a response. If he does this, and that having at least something psychologically as a guy, something I could do so I don't feel entirely powerless. Like I may still lose, but I have a viable plan that probably will work 3 out of 5 times. Was hugely beneficial, and it kind of breathes a little easier, and it's important. So do your own due diligence. We're not telling you what to do, but we're just saying what we might do and learning from it. Okay, next question. What does a usual week of working out look like for you? And how about nutrition as well? On the podcast, something that we really want to get into practicals. The idea is I want to get better. You want to get better. Everyone listening hopefully wants to get better. And sometimes I think I love to peek into other people's lives. And it's like, what are you doing at 5 a.m., 6 a.m., 7, 8 a.m., 8 a.m., in the evening, whenever you're waking up, going to bed. But starting with workout, so you can stay now that's fit for UFC or for martial arts and MMA, also just natural health. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, it depends on the season. Each season looks a little bit different, and I'm sometimes literal season. Like summer, I like to be outside running a little bit more, and in the winter, I like to eat greasier, so I lift more weights to hopefully get that muscle and not just fat. But it also just depends on season of life, how many kids we have, what our schedule's looking like. If you had gone to me 4 years ago when I lived in Eugene, I trained jiu-jitsu for exercise most nights. In the last couple of years, I train a lot less jiu-jitsu and do a lot more working out, because it's actually kind of part of our time together. My wife and I, we work out together. And because we want to that's a value of ours. I have never been, except for a jiu-jitsu gym, because you have to go and you have to have other bodies to work with and you have to have a coach. I have never been a part of a gym. I've been into fitness and working out for a long time, but I'm all about the convenience of my home, eliminating drive time, eliminating gym costs, using minimal equipment. Most of my journey, I've been pro body weight. So I think you can get a lot of stuff done in your living room with, and just with a pair of running shoes. And I hate running. I'm not a good runner, hurts my knees and back, but it could be very good for you. It can be therapeutic. And so between running and sprinting and jumping and just basic body movements, you can get a lot of exercise. I love push-ups and pull-ups, and we typically work out 3 to 4 times a week. Now, there are weeks where it is so busy that we work out 1 or 2 times, but I do my best to make it to double up. So if I miss 2 days, I want to absorb those 2 days if I can. Not everybody would agree with that theory and call it overworking. For me, it works and I like it.
Like you would double up the amount of time on that follow-up day?
So like if I had a workout plan for Tuesday and a workout plan for Wednesday and I miss Tuesdays, I do Tuesday on Wednesday and I do Wednesdays.
Okay.
Yeah, I do both workouts in one day. And there have been times in my life where that was kind of the consistent schedule. Like I would just, instead of working out a half hour 5 days a week, I would work out for like 2 hours, 2.5 hours twice a week. Just depends on the season of busyness and life. I work out mostly in the evenings. The romantic part of me wants to get up super early and do it all, but
those boxing montages, man, nothing better.
That sleep is important too, and I think we'll talk about this a bit more. But basically, it's like I'd rather cut out screen time than I would sleep. Sleep is more important, and so I like body weight stuff. We do have some dumbbells, and we need to replace our barbell. It's destroyed, so we have used that. And I've had seasons where I've all body weight stuff, seasons where it's all lifting, maybe because of injuries, seasons where it's mostly cardio, seasons where it's mostly strength and toning. But and then nutrition, we just try to be balanced. Like we've had seasons where we were pretty like we only eat clean, we only eat organic, and we only eat at these times. Our lifestyle, it's just not always that easy. We eat out quite a bit. One, because that is convenient with our lifestyle. 2, because it's not always more expensive. And 3, because we enjoy it. It's like we don't have a lot of things we veg on, things that we like, but eating out is one of them. And so that said, we just try to stay balanced. Like if we're going to eat something bad, we gotta make sure that we eat something really good as well. And so we try to make sure we have a balanced diet, a lot of veggies, and not overdoing it, right? Like if we're going to go out somewhere bad one day, then we're going to try to make sure that we either earned it or pay for it the next few days. But we're not crazy about diet stuff. We just try to do a good job.
Maybe a follow-up question. I'm trying to remember. I don't think you ever got big. I think you must. Do you have a big a fast metabolism?
Yeah, especially when I was younger. I did get chunkier. Right now I'm 180 and I was 210 before my first daughter was born. That was kind of like a lot. It was diet and hormones. So because I was actually fairly physically active with the job I had, but I was sleeping like 3 hours a night and eating lots of processed foods and sugars, which just those things, that the combination of those things is just a recipe to maintain and put on fat.
And you got up to 210. But okay. And then, so how many, but I feel like it's been quite a few years where you've been in what I imagine is pretty close to your goal body weight composition. And Tom's is lean, 5'10",
6 foot.
You're 6 foot. Come on. Cool. That's not a come on. Like, I don't believe it. Just cool. 6 foot, but like strong, lean. And obviously for everyone listening and different guys listening, probably have different goals, what they want their body to look like, what they want to do. I guess digressing for a second, I know, and I'm going to ask your advice on the podcast and get even some more wisdom. We've chatted about it. my goal is I want to, sounds silly, sounds funny maybe, but I want to be
Yeah.
a warrior. I want to be able
Yeah.
to, if I need to, the gas runs out, jog 4 miles or so to get some gas for my family if they're in the car, and get back that 4 miles as quick as possible. I want to be able to, I think I don't really follow him, but Jocko Willink, the Navy
Yeah. Yeah.
SEAL.
Mm-hmm.
I just saw one thing on him on like Instagram or something where he basically said, like, in a lot of situations, the right answer is he'll run away, because if you
Yeah.
fight, you're going to probably get
Absolutely.
sued. There's going to be this trouble. As far as I'm aware, he can very well. I think he can fight. I think he can.
Oh
He
yeah.
probably
Yeah. Yeah.
talks about that. But so I want to be able to outrun a guy if he's bigger than me for a while, and if no one else needs to be protected. I want to be able to, so that, like, resilient, strong, and I want to be able to do it. I want to be able to be the protector of my family. In addition to God's the greatest protector, but till I'm kind of an old man, probably into my 70s, I want to be able to be a threat.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like the way you're training and your body, that I think that would probably be similar-ish.
Mm-hmm.
Back to the question, you've been that health for quite a few years. How many years? And then there's a follow-up question to that. But how long have you been kind of in this routine of certain body weight, muscle, working out pretty regularly? How many years has that been?
Well, it's a journey. I think that health and fitness really came on my radar probably 10, 11 years ago. And the results didn't hit probably for 4 or 5 years after that. Like as I was accumulating information and starting to exercise and going through life changes. In the last 5 years, we've been a lot more diligent in results seen. Yeah. So for a long time, and I'll preface too everything I say with, I'm not an expert. I have no degrees in nutrition. I have no certifications. I'm not a personal trainer. What we have done, both my wife and I, has worked, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we did all the right things. Sometimes it's luck or dumb luck, right? But I believe in a lot of those things, but prefacing that with a lot of
Trial
people
and
know a
error.
lot better. Yeah, a lot of people know better too. So I reserve the right to be wrong.
So hey, that's a good right to reserve. I guess what I want, where there is some credibility for me with you, and like you're saying, hey, you're not claiming anything, but that we'll see people. We all know people that lose weight or even get a little stronger for maybe a year,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
but 5 years is a while. 5
mm-hmm.
years tells me you probably have had, and in that time you've had one move at least in that time, one
Two,
job shift,
two, two moves, several jobs, at
two
least 3
cities,
job shifts. Yeah,
multiple jobs. Were any of
2
your kids born
kids.
in that window?
Yeah, 2.
Two of them. That's a lot of what I would say threats that would have naturally been like, yeah, after the job shift or after the baby, that's when I got off the bandwagon. Um, and so to me, one, just that, hey, good job, and that shows some consistency. And it's why I'm interested in what you're doing. So one thing you said, and that sounds that is extreme. It sounds like it's gritty. I'm not here
Mm,
to say it's not right, but is that your way of is saying, hey, if I miss a day, I'm going to double up. I'm going to go extra hard.
yeah,
And it sounds like you don't miss a week very often entirely.
right.
Is
Yeah,
that accurate too?
totally. I've had injuries from jiu-jitsu, tore my pec last year, and that, like, then I was only capable of some things. Had my
Did they
wisdom
give
teeth
it
removed.
back? Give it back, man.
It's got like a protuberance. It's always there.
I
Um,
know.
I had my wisdom teeth removed recently, and so I was forced to not like exercise. So there's definitely been weeks, or holidays we try to like relax, but by and large, broad strokes, I try not to miss weeks entirely.
Okay, holidays. How do you like on vacation? For if you take a 1 or 2 week vacation, are you working out, or is that you're not going to basically purposely work out for those 2 weeks?
Most times I'll go into it with the idea of not working out, but sometimes I get like antsy or um, not convicted's not the word, but like self-conscious about it. So it depends on the vacation. If we're gone, it's easy for me not to. If we're doing any kind of like a stay-at-home vacation, then I almost end up always drifting to doing something. My personality though is like a high pre-planning. Um, and thinking ahead, and I like to pay to play. So I like to get me a physical goal before entering a season of rest, to feel like I earned it, to feel like, hey, I did all this and now I can just relax and not lose a bunch of progress. Like I earned that. There's a dietitian named Mike Dolce, and he doesn't believe in what we would call cheat meals. He calls them earned meals. Like you can't cheat on your diet, but you can earn a reward.
Interesting. Yeah, and that is what I'm definitely struggling with and trying to balance out. Is on one hand, I think what we all know is there's such thing as too rigid in almost anything.
Yeah.
Where the answer
Yeah.
is, I mean, not in like loving Jesus and walking in righteousness, but it's like I never budge, I never change, I never stop going straight. Where you're going to walk into a highway, like you have to adapt. And definitely now you bring in kids and family and anniversaries. And so I know that there has to, I believe anyways, that there has to be times when I have to just eat the cake, enjoy.
Yeah.
My birthday yesterday, ate the carrot cake, ate a second piece of carrot cake. But because I want to enjoy the rest of my life. But at the same time, trying to track that line where now I'm really undermining a month's of work. And that is not worth, that to me is generally not, if I really thought about it and I knew that's what I was doing, probably not worth that extra piece of cake or that. And it's not just a cake. It's not one time. It's like a week of vacationing and eating, really liberally. Finding that balance is difficult. And I don't know if there's like for you, if there are like numbers or metrics. I've learned personally that I will drive my wife insane if I calorie count, and I get so anal.
Yeah.
And I was talking to a trainer, and they kind of gave me some advice how you might go about it differently, and just slowly start portioning down until you see your body composition changing. But how do you keep track of that? It's like, and maybe is it on a weekly basis, like you're saying, where it's like, okay, I gave a little give here, I cheated, or I earned the meal here. How are you keeping track of that balance? And or have you had kind of a yo-yo weight? Do you get bigger on those times and then get back down? Do you lose muscle mass and then gain it back? Or in your earned days and your cheat days and cheat meals and vacation times, are you staying consistent and just kind of absorbing that somehow?
Yeah, by and large, we stay consistent, right? So we probably have like a 70-30 diet, where we eat 70% good, 30% bad. And maybe some weeks that's 60-40, some weeks that's 80-20, but on average, it's probably 70-30. And I think that just that consistency is key, right? I think missing a week is not the biggest deal. In fact, sometimes it's the best thing for you. Like if you get sick, my personality, sometimes I want to continue to exercise, but actually what I'll do is I'll weaken my immune system and then I'll be sick longer. So if you're sick for a week, it's best that you don't work out sometimes, but it's missing a month that'll get you, right? It's missing the 2, 3, 4 weeks and keep thinking, oh, I'll start then. That'll really throw you off. But for us, it's about having a sustainable, plan, basically a sustainable way of doing things, which is that, hey, we're not trying to eat 100% clean. We're not trying to be fitness models. We're just trying to do our best. We have our goals, and we're going to do that in a sustainable way where we can be consistent. If we get sick or if we're gone, then that 1 week is not going to throw us all the way off, because this is a manageable thing. Not to say that it's easy, it still pushes us. One thing too is in JiuJitsu and in grappling, one thing that really pushed me to some of these physical habits is competition. When I knew I was going to have to go out on a mat with another guy who's trying to strangle me, I wanted, one, skills that you develop in jiu-jitsu, but two, I wanted fitness. Now, there's a lot of debate on, and very good debates on whether that ends up meaning anything, because skills win fights. But that it doesn't mean nothing. And oftentimes, especially in conditioning and cardio, that it can be really valuable in a competitive. But that's pushed me to more discipline, and then I carried that discipline. So for some people, I would encourage, find some way to set a goal that you're going to have to be tested on that, whether that's a 5K or an Ironman or some sort of competition that, hey, this is the goal. I need to be in a certain kind of level of shape and condition to get there. And then you can ride that momentum and live off those disciplines. Maybe not, to the highest degree that you were training, but does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. I have a relative, a couple of them. Well, it's my brother-in-law and my brother, and they're both triathletes, just amateur, but going into competitions. And I know, especially for my brother-in-law, that's been a huge motivator. That he says he's even said, "Okay, I need to actually some way work on being more balanced but he does so good. And he really uses those competitions as a next level drive." And I know for myself, and I even thought about getting into triathletes with them. It wasn't triathlons. It wasn't the season of life. And I decided I didn't want to. But I just got back from a big, at Mount McLaughlin in Oregon, a big hike on Saturday.
Oh, nice.
And I did it, made it up to the top. It's almost 10,000 feet. You ascend 4,000 or 5,000 feet up. I think it's around 8 to 10 miles round trip. And I've made that my yearly. I knew I was going to do it for a couple months. And I've made that my yearly fitness aptitude test or my fitness level test. And last year when I went up, I barely made it. There's actually a video. Maybe I'll share it at some point. For some reason, I did my own video vlog of me kind of leaned up under a tree. You've hiked it with me, I believe. I think you've hiked above the tree line, but there's just a few little sparse trees there. And basically kind of like, I'm going to try. I don't know if I'm going to make it. I'm feeling terrible. And I was dying up and down. And I remember that. And I've been talking to Thomas, talking to different guys about health the last 4 months or something since May. And I wanted to see, okay, how's this going to work out? And it was interesting. And I part of the reason I was training, part of the reason I was motivated is because I wanted to do better on McLaughlin.
Yeah.
And it was cool when I went up. I haven't actually been training in cardio as much, more body weight, HIIT, some strength, but I would say almost doubled my capacity. I felt
that's awesome.
Almost twice as good. And it was interesting, like I said, because if I done cardio, I would have been like, I'm sure I'll probably do better.
Yeah.
But I hadn't, but still, even just the strength and getting my heart, my blood pumping, I think this is maybe technical, but a lot of the hip workouts I'm doing where you're moving your hips, and on that climb, it's like stairs and you're bringing your hip up again and again. I think just having that muscular, a little bit of more strength allowed me to not have my body start breaking down way earlier.
Absolutely.
So one, hey, I was glad about that. But two, I agree that some's having that goal. It could be a 5K, it could be a hike, it could be an event. People will, I want to look good or be healthy for an event. That's so cool. Well, there's so many areas on this. Really specifically, and you may say, hey, it kind of changes. I know you were probably like me, you don't want to like overclaim virtue or something. How long are your daily workouts, like on general? Because I want to know. I've actually been doing a workout, P90X3, one of the old workouts with a friend. We're doing that 4 days a week together. I'm loving it. It's 30 minutes. Prior to that, for like a month and a half, I was doing like an hour and a half to 2 hours of walking around the gym doing my resistance training, which I had never done. And that was cool. And when I started doing that, I thought, you can't do anything under an hour. I started to think that in that little bit of time, like serious people. And I did this 30 minutes. I'm like, no, clearly I think it does work. It's helpful. Feel challenged. So I think there's a window of how long you can do. What do you do? What is, because your results are, I think, really admirable. What's the length and kind of intensity of your workouts on a weekly basis?
Yeah, I think on average, I'd work out from about an hour and a half. Maybe, let's call it an average of an hour and a half, 3 to 4 times a week. It depends on what's coming up, what's the goal at that time. I think in this season, you'd get like a Monday, I would do a warm up for about 10 minutes. That's like bear crawls and crab walks and stair runs. I'd get a good stretch, and then I would pump out a bunch of push-ups, pull-ups, and tricep dips. And in my mind, that kind of like engages those muscles and my body for the week. It's kind of a warm up for the week. Then on a Tuesday, I might do some cardio.
Thomas, that's in the morning or is that in the evening?
Almost always evening. So like, again, so I think I wrote in.
You've already actually started your week.
Yeah.
And are you working out Sundays?
Not usually. if for whatever reason, and I'm a pre-planner, so I usually know what's going on the next week. If I look ahead and say, hey, there's no evenings or opportunities, and sometimes we'll squeeze one in on a Sunday, but pretty rarely.
So Monday night, push-ups, tricep dips.
For example, yeah, not always something like that. Push-ups, pull-ups, triceps. And that's a really good, you can do that from home with a pull-up bar.
Are you doing that for an hour and a half?
Sometimes it takes about an hour, depending on how many we'll do, right? So I'll do about a 10-minute warm-up, maybe a 15-minute stretch, and then it'll take about a half hour to 45 minutes to crank out 100 push-ups, 100 pull-ups, and 100 tricep dips, depending on the breaks. And that's not the reason. The main reason some of these things take so much time is because we do it as a family, and it's not like cranking it out by yourself. Every 2 seconds, a child needs something. And so it's a family thing. It's not just like a me thing. And even if it's just me really doing, they're not like really doing push-ups and pull-ups, and we're not forcing them to, but it becomes fun. Okay, so technically we actually start with a jog around the house. We'll play tag. So my daughters and I and my wife will play tag for what was supposed to be 5 minutes. Sometimes it'll go 15 minutes. Like, that's how we start the workout to get everybody running around. And again, it's not us saying, kids, we're going to work out. Usually it's like mom and dad are going to work out and they're like, can we play tag?
So something cool to highlight is you're doing this with your wife.
Yeah. Most of the time. Yeah.
You're both staying fit and you're actually integrating your kids into it.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes our programming is different, actually fairly often. And sometimes even the timing is different, but on average, again, broad strokes, this is what it would look like.
Good. Oh, we're saying
some of these things, like I said, when they're taking an hour and a half, someone at home might be like, why did that take so long? It's because we're feeding kids and getting them settled and solving disputes and whatever else. So then maybe on a Tuesday, we'll start with a 2-mile run in the evening, and my kids go on that too. They don't run. My oldest daughter will ride her bike. My youngest daughter will ride her scooter, and my son is in the stroller. We'll run 2 miles as a warm-up. We'll get a good stretch. We'll hit some sprints. And then sometimes we'll do some like leapfrog style jumping. We haven't done that in a while. But then we'll move to burpees. I love burpees. I'll do a burpee with a sprawl instead of a push-up, because a lot of my workouts is designed to improve my grappling functioning, like functional movements and stuff like that. And
then about a sprawl.
What's that?
I just learned about sprawls.
Oh yeah. A sprawl is how to keep someone off your hips when they're trying to take you down. So it's a basic wrestling movement or grappling movement. So like we'll do our sprints. We'll come in. We'll do like a 10 burpees, 1 minute plank, 1 minute rest. 10 burpees, 1 minute plank, 1 minute rest. We'll do that like 10 times, depending on the season. Sometimes if we're coming out of a break, we'll cut that in half and then work back up.
Hey, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Burpees. So that's not just like a squat. That's a drop down to a plank. So is that what a burpees and then back up to like from a squat to jump?
Your traditional burpee that you'll see people do is they'll hop. It's really like the smallest little jump, and then they'll drop to a push up, and then get back up and jump. So I changed the way I burpee primarily for grappling, and I do 2 things differently. When I jump, I explode as high as I can. I jump as high as I can. For me, it's emulating any explosive kind of takedown in a grappling situation. The ability to just explode. So I'll squat down as high as I can. I'll squat as low as I can, jump as high as I can, getting my knees to my chest. As soon as my feet touch the ground, I'm sprawling. So I'm dropping my hips to the mat, kind of like a vinyasa. Like my hands touch the mat or the ground, and my hips do too. And then I'm back up. And that was 1 burpee for me.
Yep.
Again, a traditional burpee looks a little bit different. And then we'll go into the plank. And then after all the burpees and planks, if that's our HIIT workout, sometimes we'll go into some wall sits, or we'll burn out with like some bicycle crunches. But I like to like do a warm-up day, do a high intensity cardio day, and then go into more like a toning over the next few days. So whether that's some dumbbell lifting, presses and curls and then some abs. My wife will do different things. Her programming would be different on those days. And if there was any jiu-jitsu in there, usually I'd like that on the front of the week with a fresh body rather than having a broken down body. It just depends on the week. But those are like some of the things that we're doing right now. And I'm not like a avid lifter. I've only been lifting more consistently for like the last year or 2 years, and I don't have a lot of heavy weights. But I like to press. I like to chest press and floor press, shoulder press. I like doing a lot of raises and yeah.
Are you using, and I wouldn't even known what those were till a couple of months ago, and I barely know now.
Yeah.
I'm learning that, if I'm aware, you can do those with some of them. You can do with the kettlebell. You can do almost all those with dumbbells,
Yeah.
and then you can do them
I've
with
done,
barbells, right?
yeah. In the winter, I was doing a lot more heavy barbell stuff, trying to put on some muscle mass. My barbell is all destroyed right now. But even then, like I would emulate, I don't have a bench, but I would do a floor press with heavy weight. And then we would also do deadlifts and squats. Like after our legs are tired from all that, we would do the heavy, let's get some like strength too while they're already broken down. So deadlifts and squats and stuff like
And
that.
you're doing that
But
with your barbell or with separate dumbbells.
both. In the winter, I was doing more barbell stuff. Right now, I do almost no barbell stuff and almost all dumbbell stuff. So
Because you
low
can
weight
do like a Romanian deadlift. You couldn't do it with I've done it with a barbell, but you can do it with
dumbbells.
dumbbells, right?
Yep.
Um, well, so much interesting about that. Obviously, just the practicals of what you're doing, you're modifying for your interests slash your competition focus with grappling. I think for everyone watching, something that hopefully in our community on this podcast that people will get is, hey, let's not have anyone feel bad. Everyone's at a different spot. Thomas is at a different spot than I'm at, and he's ahead in many ways in terms of fitness. There are people that I might be further ahead than. There's people that are ahead of both of us. But learning from one another, getting tips, then applying it, saying, hey, I'm not going to do 100 push-ups for my
Yeah,
lifestyle, but 50 is way better than 0 or
absolutely.
25 or, 10.
Yeah,
Um,
10. Yeah.
and but then what I loved is we're listening and listening to the practicals. Is I think you might see a guy that's real fit and think he's got the nicest, most expensive gym that he may turn on his music, but turns on his music, locks the kids out, and just grinds. And that's why and you hear an hour and a half even, it goes, oh, and like when I hear an hour and a half, I go, oh man, I'll never get there. I'm at 30 minutes, and it's like, but when you go, oh, it's taking a little longer because you're working hard, but it's taking a little longer because you've solved the childcare thing because your kids are with you.
Yeah.
You're not depriving that time with your wife because she wants to do it. I don't think you're making her do it, but
No.
now you're doing it together, and there's this bonding. And to me, that's gold. Take that and go. And that's as we dig deeper into people's lives and stories, and as I've heard other interviews, because we're just being this podcast. That's what I love to hear is go, it's not quite what I thought it was. And
Yeah.
they're just humans. They're just real people. And they found workarounds, quirky, fun, smart workarounds, just like anyone else to make it work.
Yeah.
And so I loved that one. It's like, oh, and obviously it's pretty amazing for your kids, the health habits that they're establishing now.
Yeah.
So to me, like that's like gold is man, if your spouse wants to do that with you, I think kids are almost always going to probably want to do that with you because they just love you
Yeah.
with mom and dad. As well, who doesn't want to play tag?
Right.
My 19-month-year-old, when I'll get down and do push-ups, she gets down on her knees and kind of tries to do a push-up too.
Yeah.
So they're so I love that you're giving them that framework right now. Obviously, if any of us go crazy and we're like 5 hours a day, and mom and dad never let me eat nothing but broccoli and made me do bajillion push-ups, that would be unhealthy. That would be crazy. But
Right.
having that healthy and joyful and fun environment, I know that you're modeling other things like loving Jesus and coming to church, and
Yeah.
it's really, really cool. So I think for everyone listening, I hope
Thank you.
our brains are firing off and going, yeah, I could go on that walk. I could integrate this
Yeah.
into it, and that's how I could probably get my first workout in, or get start that habit.
Oh yeah. I would say if we're giving advice to people coming off a couch who have physical goals, if there is anything that you like to do that is physical, Like, just do that. Trick yourself into exercising. Have
It's
fun.
good.
Like, if you like soccer, go play soccer. All of a sudden, you're exercising. It's really good for you, but you're also having fun. Now, if you don't like anything physical, I just start with taking some walks. The reason that we do these things and we're consistent is because it's a core value to us. And I talked earlier about, like, I believe health is holistic, and I notice hormonally in my emotions, in how that affects my marriage and my parenting when I'm not taking care of my body. And we do it as a family to model good habits, not because we have a heavy expectation on our kids to be physically and to look a certain way or weigh a certain amount. If they hate working out, then whatever. We just want them to take care of their bodies. And I want them to see that mom and dad modeled that. But the core value thing, you hear the hour and a half a day or a couple times a week. Yes, that hour and a half for us, it means that we're not all congregated around the TV every night from 7 to 8:30 or 6 to 7:30. Not that I don't want to be. I love watching TV. Like, one thing I've been talking to Melissa about is I wish there was like a 2-week time would pause for like 2 weeks so I can just play video games, because I haven't in so long, and my soul's wanting to like veg and relax, and I probably should listen to that to some degree. But like my wife, Melissa, she says, we need a new show to binge watch. And that gives me anxiety because I don't want to commit. I know what that means. That means other things will either slip away, whether that be important things or sleep. And I know how important sleep is and how that affects our emotions and our health and our parenting. And so I'm scared of watching new shows because I love them. And so so for me, the best is to just pretend like there are none, that they don't exist. Anyway, the core value thing, we can all often come up with values, a list of values. The difference is the values that you can prove and protect. And I didn't come up with that. I can't remember where that came from, but it's easy to say, hey, I put my core values are God, then family, then maybe health, fitness, and finance. It's easy to put them on a list. It's harder to prove it. Like, show me by your time and energy, are you proving that those are your values? Like, you might know that they should be, and then you can prove it for a while. It's even harder to protect it. It's even harder to maintain it. But for us, it's become such a core value that we're constantly trying to prove it to ourselves, to our kids, and to protect that. And that means even foregoing. And again, nothing against TV, movie. I love them all. There are seasons where we do a lot of that. I want to do more of that, but not at the expense of something more important, which for us, physical activity, because it's holistic and affects everything else, it is that important. There's an old influencer who said, you always have time for what you make time for. I didn't come up with that, but it stuck with me. Like, hey, it's easy to say I don't have time. Well, you have time. You just made time for other things.
Yeah, that's so good. And I like that. Okay, prove it, protect it. And not necessarily prove it to someone else. Prove it to yourself. Yeah. Are you in denial? Yeah. Do you value this? Okay. Self-examination. Let me prove it to myself. Where is the time that I'm investing in this value? And then how do I protect it?
Yeah.
And is there? And I think habits that are resilient are that uninterrupted compounding is so powerful, but it has to be uninterrupted. It has to be protected. It has to be consistent.
Yeah. Move from profess, prove, protect.
Okay, so you start at the profess. Now you got to prove it, and then protect. The 3 Ps. I like it. We're going to move towards wrapping up. It was such a good conversation. I already learned quite a bit from my own health journey, but I said I was going to ask that, and I want to model that here on the podcast. We've talked a bit before. I want to drop about 20 pounds, put on a bit more muscle. Any advice for me, your pal?
For you specifically, or for people in general?
No, me.
Yeah.
Just don't make me take off my shirt and shake my belly.
You know, the dirtiest secret in all of dieting and weight loss is time. And it starts with goal setting, like what your goal is. And you said being more capable, you have a number. So I think there's some muscle mass that you want, some capability. I think you have to set not only the goal of what you want to look like or feel like, but when you want to be there, because that does change the workload. If you're okay with playing the long game, most of the time that's much more manageable. Because
I'll interrupt you, and you coach me seriously and tell me if I'm missing it, because I haven't achieved this before, right? I haven't achieved consistent
Yeah,
goal weight and health, and I I think that I would be more likely to achieve it if I was surged, because I would I'm kind of an extreme person. If it was all I was focusing on, it would excite me, and excitement I think is good in goal achievement. But I don't think it is the right thing for my family and my season of life. And I may be mistaken. You may help me see what I'm not seeing. But I think it would come at a stress and a cost that would rob other values in my life. That
yeah,
I feel like I almost can't be as a good steward go that route, that I have to take the patient route. But I haven't achieved
totally.
it yet. Maybe that's my problem. Help me out, Tommy.
No, I agree with what you're saying as an outside observer, because people close to me have done the fast route, and it just takes a lot of discipline and sacrifice. It takes going to bed hungry, counting a lot of calories, and shredding a lot of calories. I mean, weight loss at the end of the day is really math, right? Calories in, calories out, and that is broad strokes, because there are genetic things, there are biological things, body types where people respond differently to certain methods. And really, most methods work. It's just a matter of discipline and putting in the long game. Some people don't respond to the long game because here's what happens. They burn, let's say, 1,500 calories that week, and they worked fairly hard, or at least what they were compared to, but that's about a half a pound that would reflect on the scale at the end of the week. Well, half a pound is 8 ounces of water. So if you drank 8 ounces of water, stepped on the scale, you're not going to see anything. If you drink 16 ounces of water, you're going to look like you're going to think you gained weight.
Yeah.
So it's hard. For some people who want to see results, the long game is very difficult, especially as you're converting muscle to fat. The scale isn't changing. Your body composition is, but not in a very quickly visible way. So committing to the process can be difficult for some, because they just want to see in the mirror. They want to see on the scale. Now, to do those things quickly, oftentimes you have to shred fat and not build a lot of muscle. And again, I'm not like an authority on the subject per se, but that's doable. It's just, it takes hey, this is what I'm going to do. But for you and,
Yep.
and what you're saying, I would say stick with some of that muscle building, those functional muscle movements, like commit yourself to the squats, to the lifts, put some muscle mass, let's start burning fat and committing to burning muscle mass, but also getting your body prepared to move into a season of high intensity stuff eventually. One of the best ways to do that is commit to speed walking, like an old person, right? Speed walking consistently, even on days that you're not lifting, or maybe as a warm up before you're lifting, to burn some calories. Walking burns almost just as much calories as running. It just does it twice. It just takes twice as long. But it's somewhere everyone can start. And the same thing with interests. If you have, and I know you have a lot of athletic interests, do those things. But when it comes to diet, two things: the building blocks for diet, for nutrition, for weight loss are always going to be water and sleep. And it's two things that people often forego. Yeah, drinking lots of water is good for you. It's good to flush things out. It's good for you hormonally. It's like the oil in your car. It keeps things working better. But sleep is a huge one. When we deprive our body of rest, not only do we not recover as fast. So if your programming is intense and you're staying really sore, the more sleep you get, the more water you drink, the faster you recover, which means the quicker you can do another workout to burn more calories and get stronger, or the harder you can work out. You know what I mean? So that's, at some point, recovery becomes king, because you just need to get to the next thing and perform the best that you can. I mean, honestly, what people don't realize, and there's a lot of misconception on steroids and professional sporting. A lot of what we call steroids are really just hormones that your body isn't producing, that you're giving yourself. It doesn't make you stronger by osmosis. It helps you recover so that the things that you're doing make you stronger.
Interesting.
Anyway, sleep is so important. It's even hormonally, if you don't get the right rest, your body retains fat longer because it feels like it needs it. And anyway, I would say start with good sleep, brisk walks, weightlifting, and then progressive load is king. So when you're weightlifting, every session you have, you should be doing a little bit more than you did the last session, whether that's reps, sets, or weight itself. Like, you want to progressively overload your body. So if you did 20 body weight squats last week, you should be doing 30 this week. If you did 100 pounds with your squats last week, you should be doing a little bit more if you can, whether that's more reps or more weight. That makes sense? Always pushing yourself. But I would get somebody to write you a program on those functional movements while you're committing yourself to, whether that's walking or some sort of like kind of cardio thing, as you're preparing your body with rest and water and good eating choices. And then one big game changer is intermittent fasting. Everybody intermittent fasts. They just don't always know it. Breakfast is break fast, right? So we all intermittent fast in our sleep. And intermittent fasting is so good for weight loss, for clarity of mind, all kinds of things. And I'm sure that and I've heard that there are people who can go overboard and then your body responds the wrong way. What I find with people who embrace intermittent fasting, their first instinct is to skip breakfast instead of cut off their eating later at night. And that's the wrong choice. Breakfast is a good meal. I don't eat a lot of breakfast, so I'm kind of hypocritical here, but what it's supposed to do is give you good calories at the beginning of the day to use its energy. You don't need a lot of calories at night. Now, our tendency, or mine, is to snack and eat a bunch of calories at night because I'm watching TV and it's comforting. But then I go to sleep and my body's like, all right, that's going to just turn into fat. So one of the easiest, without doing a lot of physical exercise, ways to lose weight is just cut your eating off early. Don't snack late at night. Like, have dinner, and that's when your intermittent fast starts. Because your body will burn stored fat for you while you sleep if you just do that. And your digestive system gets a break in that intermittent fast. And if you support it with a probiotic like a kombucha or something, it does it even better. Processes things better for you, gets things cleared out. Anyway, those are some of the ways that I would start: is rest, intermittent fasting, water, getting a program for your lifting schedule. It doesn't have to be like, you're trying to get jacked, but just making sure that you're building muscle and preparing. And I would probably, we're moving into winter, I would commit to that kind of lifestyle till probably spring, like 6 months of lifting weights, focusing on rest, eating, vegetables, and you're eating a balanced diet, including more protein, right? Especially as dudes, we need protein. Cutting out empty calories as much as you can. And when that springtime hits, your body composition should have changed, at least some, more muscle mass, less body fat, and prepare to start as the sun comes back out. Maybe put those running shoes on, do a little bit more cardio as you get closer to that goal. I don't know. That's some thoughts off the top of my head.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. It's really good. Let me throw a theory out for you as we wrap up. Okay. First off, I receive all that feedback. I think everything you said sounds good, and it's verified. Like, I've heard other guys and experts and podcasts. None of that all sounded very like good advice. When I have listened, and I'm thinking as we talk, we're going to talk about health quite regularly on this podcast. What I know is we're going to get almost contradictory advice.
Totally.
And my way, it really threw me for a long time to get that. So even as I'm processing this and helping our audience, maybe as we listen to all these different people who are experts because that's literally their job, or because they're just successful at it, they're having the results that we want in that area of life. Here's how I've learned to try to process it. One, I guess, is just to not be freaked out that there might be a little contradiction, because maybe there's more than one way to do something, or maybe if we had a longer conversation, we would have actually agreed in the end. But part of it for me, and what I'm trying to do, and this maybe won't work for everyone, it's still somewhat experimental, is it's maybe going to sound weird. It's that positive mental attitude kind of a thing, which is I used to read the blog, because I'm really particular and I like math. And so I'd read a blog that says you need like 7 to 9 hours a night of sleep. And so I would try to schedule that in, but then I would read an article about prayer life and your faith, and you need to pray and read the Bible for 1 to 2 hours a day or 30 minutes a day. And then you need to spend this much time with your spouse and this much time with every child. And suddenly I'd be like, I've run out of time. I can't do it all. And I know on the back end of that, there's a spiritual part to all of this. There's also a biological, hormonal, emotional part of all this that, for example, stress releases hormones, right? That are really not like, can be bad for your body. Like a little bit of stress, like for exercise is good. I think it releases things that it actually brings healing to your body, but too much. And so I'm getting to a point here, which I've kind of come to realize, like, what I'm going to do, what I can do joyfully, I'm going to do what I can do, feeling kind of like a champ and can live with every day. And if I feel, I hope this is making some sense, but if it's like, if I feel like a warrior and I'm making progress and I'm glad with the things are going and I got a little less sleep, but I feel less stressful because I feel like good with my life, I'm hoping that lack of stress will compensate for that lack of sleep. Or if I'm working out and I'm building there, but I maybe ate a little bit bad, they're kind of, the things compensate a little bit, that there's more to it, and it kind of, things do compensate a little bit. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think we could talk a long time about contradictions of theories and approaches, right? And I think you nailed it on the head that sometimes that comes down to the person, but also sometimes it comes down to their motive of why that they have that theory, because most of the sources that you found those theories, they're profiting off of them. And that's just what it comes down to, right? Like they're selling information. And so whether their information is totally true or not, whether you're just clicking the follow button or not, they're, at the end of the day, they're trying to profit. And so you have to source
their weight training methodology, or you have to buy their supplement, or
exactly. So sourcing is important for your information. But talking from like your perspective right now, I think there always has to be a degree of concessions, because I'm the same way, the exact same way. Like if I read, and I have read articles about sleep, then I'm like crazy about sleep. Well, I have an infant, so that's not working out for me right now. And I have to realize, and I think I've talked a couple of times about seasons, that there are adjustments. There are times where I'm doing really well in my diet, maybe not so well in exercise, and okay in sleep. And then there are seasons where I'm doing pretty great in sleep, not so well in diet, pretty good in exercise. You know what I mean? Like and I have to look at it holistically, not just like judge it based on that season, but the seasons together. Like, hey, from a macro perspective, in the last year, I'm doing well. That makes sense? Not just like this week or even this month. And I think that honestly, that approach should be taken to a lot of different things, including your experience at a church on a Sunday morning, like the macro perspective of what they covered topically in your experience over a year, not just the sample that you got that Sunday. And that's kind of just the world I'm in right now. So that's why I use that as an illustration. But I think that if you look at your health that way too, it helps a lot. Not that, hey, we just give up and give in, but there are times you have to make concessions. And for example, for me, the sleep has been one lately. At first I was like so stressed, like, all right, now we have to go to bed early. We can never relax after the kids go to bed. And we're just underslept right now. But I know that at some point we're going to tighten that up and it's going to be okay.
And that's a perfect example, because of what I think I'm trying to tease out, which the theory is that virtue produces virtue, vice produces vice. And so to try to do as much virtue as you can, but you can't do it all. That's okay. That's right. So sleep if you can, eat well if you can, exercise when you can. The more you can do, the better. When you can't, that's going to not produce good things, but there's grace. But with that theory I'm still teasing out is what you just said as a perfect example is, okay, you could sleep in, but would it really, and you'd honor that principle of that blog that said, hey, get 9 hours, but would you really be a net positive? Because if your wife and you aren't connecting, and now that's bringing relational strain, not only holistically might you be at a net loss, but even health-wise, my theory is that you might actually, my personal theory, it sounds like what's what you're doing, is that I'm probably actually long-term going to win the health game by getting less sleep so I can talk with my wife even though it may not be a forever solution.
Yes,
Because
totally.
everything either reinforces or undermines everything else.
Yep. And an evaluation of what's the higher value. So not only the discussion with your wife, but I know for us with 3 kids, if we don't have time to kind of like drink some coffee before they're all awake, then we're much less emotionally healthy and responsive and mature with them, and we take it out on them. But if we are up early enough that we can have a couple cups of coffee, read a little Bible, talk a little bit, and honestly just breathe before there's the need of 3 children, then we handle that a lot better. And so that might come at the cost of proper ideal rest, but it serves the higher value, which is those 3 beautiful children. Not that being underslept can also affect the way we treat them. It could, but it affects us a lot less sometimes than it is getting lead time to their needs.
Yeah, we could go on and on, but that it sounds like you're pursuing what I hope we're all pursuing on this podcast is you're trying for that holistic, that balanced success. I want to win in a balanced way, and I think if that is your measurement, it has resilience. It allows for grace if an area is dropping, but overall you're winning. And then there's that optimism and that faith says, "Hey, we can get there from here. We're going to achieve. We're going to grow. We're going to have a net increase." But we'll be flexible in these moments. We'll adapt to the turbulence.
Yeah, totally.
Well, we did have a whole other podcast talking about your journey with planning a church, and so hopefully we can follow up on what you and your wife are doing with Joy Church Salem. And I think maybe kind of get an inside peek at like the beginnings of like founding. It would be like founding a business. In this case, founding a nonprofit, a church. Probably a lot of surprises, a lot of ups and downs, and cool things. But we'll kind of wrap up for this one. Final questions.
Sure.
What are you most curious about right now? And then I guess there's technically 2 more questions after that. But what are you most curious about right now yourself? The podcast is called "Can I Ask You a Question?" What's on your brain right now? Are you searching something on the Google rabbit hole? Or what are you curious about?
Yeah, my curiosity is not something I'm pursuing necessarily and that's why it's still left at curiosity, because all my attention dollars are put towards what we've got going on: 3 kids, 2 kids in school, marriage, planning the church, all the other things. But passive income and not create. I don't love the term creating wealth, or not even sometimes necessarily financial freedom. I don't love the connotations that come with those sometimes, but the idea of like, hey, getting myself in a position, or our family rather, where we're set for retirement, that we can pay for our girls' weddings, that we can, those kinds of things, and how to create passive income. And those are all the things I'm pretty curious about right now, although my brain hasn't leaned in there. Things that I know that you've probably spent a lot more time than me leaning into. So investments and whatever else. That's definitely the thing that's on my mind most, that I'm not pursuing, that I plan to pursue in the future, just because that's the age we're at. We want to start thinking through those things, and I want to be able to take care of my family even when they're not under my roof.
That's so cool. And maybe you'll tune into the Can I Ask You a Question podcast. That this is not canned, and we're going to be talking a lot about that, and awesome. Just a bunch of guys and gals and figuring things out. Okay, what is your personal favorite question and why? Is there a go-to question you've found successful to ask people or ask yourself?
Super simple. What's your story? Yeah. Just getting to know someone, where they're from, what they've been through. And I usually follow it up with, where are you going? Like what's on your heart? What's in the future? What's your dreams? And that's my favorite question to ask others. My personality by nature, I tend to ask more questions than want to answer questions. But yeah, that's what I like to ask people the most. I feel like I get the most insight on someone when I know what your story, where you've been. And I feel like they feel most valued and heard when you care about that. And that's a very open-ended question. It can be answered in 30 seconds, or it can be an hour of pouring their heart out. But what's your story?
That's so good. And it lets them, they might offer volunteer information that you wouldn't even know to ask.
Yeah, exactly.
I like it. take as short or long on this as you want. We're about letting us know about Joy Church Salem and what you and your wife Melissa are doing. But the question is, how can people follow up with you and what you're doing at Joy Church and all of that? But anything you want to tell us about the church? That's our final question. How can we support you? How can we follow you?
Yeah, we're super excited to be launching Joy Church Salem at Salem, Oregon. This fall, we're targeting October 22nd as our launch day. You can check us out at joysalem.com. You can also check out our Instagram. I think it's Joy Salem. It might be Joy Church Salem. I should know that.
In the podcast.
Great. Yeah, we're super excited. I mentioned at the beginning just a bit about my story, being born in Salem. That's where my parents are from. My dad died on those streets. As a Christian, part of my worldview is a deep conviction to serve the people around you. And so we've in the last decade or so, we've had a vision to plant a church. And we believe that's put there by God. There's a conviction and a calling, not just a good idea, but a God idea. And whenever we've considered the idea of serving a city, planting our flag as a family, it's always been Salem. It's always been, hey, let's go back to where my parents left a poor legacy, where things weren't so great, and let's go serve. Let's go pay it forward in a sense and serve that city. And so we're super excited. We're taking our kids. We're going to go plant a church. You can follow along the journey and come check us out sometime when we launch. And yeah.
So cool. Well, Thomas, my friend, thank you so much just for sharing with me, sharing with everyone listening and watching. And proud of you, proud of your family. And we're excited. I'm excited to know that there's this crazy, wild fighter going to fight for people, to go serve and help and shine the grace and love of God. It's beautiful. And it's anyone that plants a church, from what I hear, it's crazy and brave and risky. And so we're going to be cheering you on. And hopefully we can get you back on and dive into that some more and just kind of hear about the journey. But thank you so much. And we'll talk to you later, everybody.
Yeah, buddy. Thanks.
So grateful once again for that conversation with Thomas West. Lots of wisdom for us to take and apply in our own lives. I want to make sure you have a way to follow up with him and see what they're doing over at Joy Church Salem. So on Instagram and on YouTube, it's at Joy Church Salem. On Facebook, it's Joy Church Salem, and online, it is joysalem.com. If you're in the Salem, Oregon area, go check them out. They're a great couple, Thomas and Melissa. I want to once again just ask you to rate and review this podcast, super helpful, and offer you my free newsletter, The Wise Letter. Go to genoschmelzer.com and sign up today for that newsletter. With that, I'll see you next week, guys. Thank you.